If you're planning on speaking at lobby visitation and aren't aware of the procedure, there is a sign-up sheet up front here, so make sure that if you plan on speaking that you get signed up on the sheet. Okay. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you all for attending our regularly scheduled council meeting. Kay, could you call the roll?
Dennis.
Here.
Harold.
Here.
Hollenbaugh.
Here.
Phipps.
Here.
Robinette.
Here.
Roland.
Here.
Zanfordino.
Here. Okay, the minutes from our last meeting on October 4th were distributed to you prior to this meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? Hearing none, do I have a
So moved.
Second.
properly moved and seconded? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay. Kay, do we have any correspondence this evening?
Yes, I just have a couple of things. Distributed to you prior to the meeting was the financial budget summary report for the month of September, and that just needs to be noted for the record. And then also, I laid before you, and you received an email on Friday for a commission appointment to the Civil Service Commission of Eric Myers. It's a 5-year term ending 5/31/2026, and that requires your confirmation.
Mr. President,
Mr. Harold.
I move that we approve Eric Myers to be on the Civil Service Commission.
Second.
Okay, properly moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, thank you, Mr. Myers.
That's all I have.
That's going to bring us to lobby visitations. I'm assuming that before I ask the rhetorical question, do we have anyone signed up for lobby visitations? You're probably all here to speak on the same issue. So I would ask to give everyone an opportunity to speak, that if you could keep your comments fairly succinct, and if someone goes before you and they have already discussed a topic that you were planning on talking about, if you could just allude to agreeing with what they had said, or try and keep things short so that we're not here all evening long. So rhetorically, Kay, do we have anyone signed up for lobby visitation?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
First person would be Vasiliki Leontis.
If you could please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Vasiliki Leontis. I live North Summit, 119 North Summit at Bowling Green. So my statement will be pretty brief, and I will defend the rejection of the ordinance on rental inspections that is to be voted on today. As the only legislative body elected by the citizens of Bowling Green, the City Council has an obligation to produce legislation that will provide legislative grounds towards an enforceable administrative structure that can ensure effective health and safety standards for tenants of rental properties, irrespective of their economic or other status. Instead, the ordinance that's in hand today is the result of an entire section on regulations recommended by the Community Improvement Committee being scrapped after that committee worked hard for 19 months to produce those recommendations. Why? Because these recommendations were friendly to a future mandate of property inspections by an independent party, as opposed to self-inspections by property owners. The ordinance reflects the opinion that landlords should inspect their own properties while they have zero incentive to do so. This ordinance is now defended on the grounds that we should not want to generate more bureaucracy, as would be required by hiring independent inspectors or more city employees to implement inspections, and no monies should be allotted to such a program. I don't see how the city would gain anything substantive in terms of regulations of rental properties. That is, if we're truly serious about such regulations, unless we sacrifice some resources for that purpose, because I have never heard of gaining something out of nothing. You pay nothing, you get nothing. That's what self-inspections are all about. So it has also been claimed at the City Council that this is the best piece of legislation we can come up with to date. It's not perfect, but it's a good start. And that's a claim that leaves hanging the vague anticipation that the ordinance might change in the future and gain more weight and teeth and substance towards better regulation and enforceable potential. This claim is based on wishful thinking at best. Historically, such legislation has been debated for decades in this town, only to die in the hands of administration and various city councils who protect the interests of the economically and politically more powerful. So, because I anticipate there's going to be a lot of discussion following, I will say no more about these issues. But I have a request. Neoclis Leontis fought hard for substantive regulations of rental properties, and he backed his views with systematic data. As a scientist, at the time of his death more than 10 months ago, he might have been inclined to defend the ordinance that was in hand at that time, not necessarily the ordinance as it stands today. The reason is he constantly updated his decisions based on new data and the progress of ongoing discussions and processes. But he was always firm on one thing: to defend and work for change with substance, not toothless change. So in defending the direction your vote will go later, I kindly request that you not use his name or his presumed intentions to defend your own intentions. Do not defend your vote saying this is what Neoclis would want. It has been said. At best, this is potentially incorrect because you don't know what he would want today. And at worst, it's ethically wrong. Why? Because Neoclis is no longer with us to say otherwise, to say that this is not what he wants. He lacks the essential ability and liberty to defend a position that is potentially different than yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay,
Next person is Steve Green.
Good evening. My name is Steve Green, 1045 North Main Street, Bowling Green, Ohio. I'm disappointed both professionally and personally. I feel this ordinance is bad for the city of Bowling Green. It's not needed. Not one person, organization, or community group has shown me the evidence. In fact, the data that the city zoning office and the Wood County Health Department, or should I say, lack of data and lack of evidence, indicates that the existing housing issues are limited in number. Limited enough not to warrant such an overbearing, overreaching, time-consuming, and costly law. For years, a certain neighborhood group, not on the west side, has worked hard to create a narrative claiming this ordinance is needed with the ultimate goal of creating this law. They have highlighted They have underscored these limited issues to make them appear more prevalent. They have sought out ways to support this narrative over 3 decades, but always failed because there was no need and there is no need. I'm not saying there aren't some bad apples out there, but the housing stock has greatly improved from what it was 30 years ago. There are better ways to handle these limited issues without creating a costly, broad sweeping, overburdensome law. This law will punish those of us who already do the right things, as well as the individual tenants that you claim you desire to help. Random and mandatory inspections. Should this notion even be considered, it could make the city of Bowling Green vulnerable. It'll open the city up to future lawsuits. We saw what happened with a no more than 3-person unrelated city law. The city was sued and the city lost. We spent taxpayer money and used resources to defend this lawsuit. This may have been a well-intentioned law, but it was illegal. It appears that this city council right now is treading down a similar slippery slope. You all have been previously advised of this. It's incumbent upon you to defer to those warnings. I would implore city council members to set aside their personal agendas and do what's truly best for the entire city. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay.
Matt Bostorff,
Matt Bostor, 433 South Maple Street. I'm here talking about the same topic. The proposed rental ordinances, largely going to reflect what Steve said, but I've got some different points to make as well. I want to do that by addressing 2 groups of people. First, to the tenants of Bowling Green. Let me say unequivocally, you do not need to live in an unrepaired house or an apartment. Whether you're a student or a townie, this truth applies. Throughout these discussions, there seems to be a misconception forming that the landlords in this town don't care about their tenants. It's quite the contrary. Good landlords care. I know we have several great landlords in the room tonight. Tenants, again, I'm speaking to you directly. If you have shingles that are falling off your home, peeling paint, collapsing porches, leaking toilets, broken furnaces, you get the picture. Check your lease. I bet you'll find you need to submit repair claims in writing to your landlord. Do that first. Let's follow protocol. If your landlord does not respond to your requests in a timely manner, I want you to call the Wood County Health Department. This is their phone number, and make a complaint. If the complaints are warranted, you can have rent escrowed until the items are fixed. This is your legal right as a tenant, and most importantly, this exists today. No other regulation is needed to make this happen. Don't be afraid to ask for help. If you're a student, contact Student Legal Services at BGSU for assistance. Tenants, good landlords want the same things that you do. We want happy tenants who appreciate a good and safe home. You are our customers, and the properties you live in are our investments. You do not need local government or the representatives coming into your home for a random inspection to help you. You already have the power to create the change if you need it. Second, to City Council, this entire discussion, albeit lengthy, it spans several decades apparently, has stemmed from some properties in this town that were unsightly and unkept and ultimately impacting the property values of neighboring homes. We all agree on that. But at some point we veered into the weeds, needed someone to blame, and declared landlords the vermin. Let me say this as clearly as I can. I strongly caution any action that groups an entire industry or entire group of people into a collective. It's no different than saying that all lawyers are crooks, all politicians are liars, or all men are pigs. It's never that simple, and it's rarely the truth. The unsightly and unsafe homes in this town, it's a problem that would be best served with scalpel precision, and you have chosen to toss in a hand grenade. Investment property owners play a vital role in this community. We're entrepreneurs, and we provide a valuable service, and a good deal of us are members of the community. We assume tremendous risk in the initial purchase of a property or the building or renovation of a property so that we can provide a needed service to those who could not afford to buy a home, don't have credit to buy a home, or simply don't want the burden of owning a home. We incur giant piles of debt, sometimes just to eke out a few $100s a month in hopes that someday our investment will pay off. It's a very long financial play. Good landlords keep their properties up. They protect their investment, not because they are forced to, but because of basic economic principles. It can be daunting. As a landlord, you don't always get good tenants. I can't tell you the number of holes I've repaired in drywall or carpet I've had to replace because of the filthy lifestyle choices of some people. But that is the cost of doing business. And good landlords do it and learn from it. Nice places rent easier and command more money than unkept ones. And good landlords want good tenants and nice places. By lumping us together, lashing good property owners to the bad, and creating unnecessary burden on the good landlords, whether that's financial or otherwise, in my opinion, you risk stifling investment and innovation in this town. Instead of incenting people like my wife and I and other investors in town, large and small, to continue doing great things for the city, we're met with an attitude of, we don't trust you, you're probably lying to us, we want the right to come in and inspect when we see fit. It's a figurative slap to the face. Not only is this a huge reach for local government, and in my opinion, setting yourselves up for unneeded legal scrutiny, you're effectively tossing a match onto the bridge that connects a community with a local industry. There's been a lot of talk about the gateway district to the city. The idea is a phenomenal one. And to get it done, Bowling Green will need a strong relationship with local property owners who are willing to invest in that idea. Let's cultivate that relationship, not light it on fire. The landlords in this town have played ball. We've registered our properties as you've requested. The landlords have understood the motivations behind the changes you've requested, so much so that landlords have worked with you and even provided a self-inspection checklist to help clarify what inspections would look like because you asked for it. In closing, I implore you, give the hardworking landlords an opportunity to work with you via self-inspections. And if things are as bad as you believe, and I know we got some bad apples, then let's work together to identify those problems. Let's also simultaneously educate tenants about their rights and what mechanisms already exist to protect those rights, and improve the safety and conditions of their homes through a complaint-based system. I believe those steps together will yield great strides towards improvement of property in this town while holding the necessary parties accountable. Please vote against any form of mandatory random inspections. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kay?
Joan Newlove. Okay, thank you. Rick Metz.
Thanks for allowing me to speak to council tonight. Guests in the room. My name's Rick Metz. I live in 1320 Pine Valley Drive. I've been in the rental business here in Bowling Green for more than 40 years. But more importantly, I'm probably the only one here tonight that's a landlord in Oxford, Ohio, Miami University. Nobody's ever asked me about any of that, but they have inspections down there. And they have registration and licensing. They've had it ever since I built the houses. I built both houses I own there in 1996. Over the years in Oxford, Ohio, we've had students killed in fires in houses there in Oxford. We've had domestic violence, students shot, things like that. To my knowledge, we've never had those situations in Bowling Green, thank God. We all care about our properties. The inspections we have down there, I only own 2 houses, but they require a lot of time. I have to be there. You can't have your house inspected and not be there when the inspector's there or a representative of yourself. So there's that burden. Some of the landlords here in town that maybe own several hundred properties, this will be a significant cost to do these inspections. I used to do home inspections back in the 90s, that the type when people are buying a house. To do a good, thorough home inspection takes a minimum of 3 hours time. So not one of these 5 minutes in and out. The inspections down in Oxford are done once every 2 years. I've never failed, but I have to be there. I have to make the arrangements to be there to meet the inspector. And all they check really is smoke detectors and fire extinguishers. But I've never had violations where they've had to go any deeper and do any inspections like that. So it's not a burden down there, but again, for the landlords here in Bowling Green that own many, many units, it's going to take a lot of time and require costs. I don't know what input council has received from tenants. I know I've encouraged my tenants to contact their council people, relay their feelings. One thing the tenants have indicated to me, they do not want to pay any more rent for things, inspections or costs like that. Hopefully they've indicated that to council members. There's another aspect that I want to address to council too. My wife works for the Wood County Committee on Aging. She's the volunteer coordinator. So periodically I get called out to deliver meals to people here in Bowling Green, people that's sometimes the only food that they have for the day is the meal they get for free from the Wood County Committee on Aging. There's places around Bowling Green, maybe you council people have no idea, a back end of a garage or something like that, that somebody lives in there because that's all they can afford. These are not college students. These are citizens of Bowling Green, some people in their 80s and 90s. What's going to happen to these people when there's these additional burdens put on the landlords and the rents have to go up? Are these people going to be forced out of our community to the rural communities of Weston or Jerry City or places like that? We need to be a welcoming community. And as many of you know, this issue has come up here in Bowling Green for many, many years. And I think in the 80s, this was the result of all the discussions we had. I'll leave it here. The landlord-tenant brochures that were produced. And like the other speakers have said, we've never seen a list of how many problems there are or what we're trying to address and how serious this is. And so I encourage you to either table this, let's work together, let's work through this, let's talk about more issues and come up with something that doesn't put a cost on the tenants that we have in Bowling Green, and there's hundreds of them. And it's not all on the east side of town. We deliver meals into the 4, 5, 6 blocks on the west side of Main Street. Again, many places. I'd encourage some of you council people to get out and see these folks and realize that that food they get for noon sometimes is the only food they have. They're on that tight of a budget. So $10 a month or $20 a month to those people would be a tremendous burden. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay.
Jan Veach.
I'm Jan Veach from 115 William Street, proud member of East Side Neighborhood Group. My question is very specific to the ordinance. In 121.04, Section A, it talks about multifamily dwellings not being required to submit to an inspection. And I need to know if that covers large apartment complexes and houses that have been turned into 3 or more family dwellings. The dwelling, in the definitions, there's a multifamily dwelling definition, and that says 3 or more dwelling units. And I know we've talked about the fire inspections that the large complexes have. But I don't see any differentiation there. And I think it's an important one to know because there are numerous family houses that have been converted to 3 or more dwelling units. So I don't know if you want to wait till the discussion of the ordinance or if somebody can answer that question right now.
Mike, do you want to explain that real quick? is the
I
question.
guess the short answer is that all units, whether multifamily, as it's defined, all rental units are required to participate in the inspection program. The exception that I think you're talking about has to do with if units are annually inspected by any other governmental agency, with the fire department being an example. And that is if the inspection includes matters substantially similar to the form the city will come up with. So it's not true that multifamily units are not subject to this. But there could be an alternative way to comply with this if there are properties out there that are inspected some other way. I guess that's a short.
Are there properties like, I don't know, maybe Section 8 housing or something that have to receive federal inspections? or-
Yes. And that's another example we could have used. Some of the multifamily units receive an inspection from the fire department because their insurance providers required and it's arranged for, and our fire department does it.
Right.
But they inspect all the common areas of all the multifamily units in town right now. But that's not what this is about.
Right. And I think there's
Yeah.
some confusion here because I think some people, when they look at this, they think, well, if the fire department goes into the common areas and checks for a smoke detector or something,
Yeah,
that somehow complies, and that's not
No.
what this says.
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Jan, did that help clear that up a little bit?
Yes. Think so. And I just want to say, or make a comment. I'm wondering why we have a problem, and we do have a problem, with housing. And our landlords here tonight are saying there is no problem. There are a few bad apples. Why haven't those bad apples been taken care of by now, over a 40-year period? The landlords have an association. They have some power. The city has power. Why are we here discussing this again and again if there are no problems and there's easy remedies? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay.
That's it.
That's everything for lobby visitation. All right. That brings us to the introduction of new legislation.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette.
from the Finance Committee, I've got 3 resolutions and 3 ordinances. First, a resolution transferring previously appropriated funds. A resolution authorizing the sale of obsolete or unfit municipally owned personal property, which is not needed for public use, by internet auction, and authorizing the municipal administrator to enter into a contract with GovDeals, Inc. for ongoing internet auctions for calendar year 2022. And a resolution authorizing the municipal administrator to enter into a renewal of the agreement with the Wood County Public Defender. I also have an ordinance providing supplemental appropriations for the current expenses and other expenditures of the city of Bowling Green, Ohio during the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2021 and ending December 31st, 2021. An ordinance amending and adopting section 33.04 of the codified ordinances of the city of Bowling Green, Ohio relative to pay scales for seasonal employees, and an ordinance authorizing the Public Services Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract or contracts for various roadway improvements.
Okay. I have an ordinance authorizing the Utilities Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract or contracts for supplying of annual inventory requirements, underground and overhead lines insurance, sale of scrap materials, and participation in the AMP Joint Purchasing Program in 2022 from the Utilities.
Mr. President,
Ms. Phipps.
From the Planning, Zoning, and Economic Development Committee, I have an ordinance amending the zoning district map of the city of Bowling Green, Ohio for approximately 4.21 acres of land located at 300 East Poe Road from M2 General Industrial to B2 General Commercial Zoning as petitioned for by Robert and Patricia Maurer.
Okay. That brings us to official reports. Mr. Mayor, do you have a report this evening?
Good evening. I have no report, subject to any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions for the mayor this evening? All right, thank you very
Thank you.
much. Municipal Administrator, Ms. Treader. Okay. Are there any questions for Ms. Treader? Thank you. City Attorney? Are there any questions for Mr. Marsh this evening? I mean, at the moment. Public Services Director. Are there any questions for Mr. Fawcett this evening? All right. Public Infrastructure Director, Mr. O'Connell. What an unusual evening. Are there any questions for Mr. O'Connell this evening? Okay. That being said, that brings us to council committee reports. Are there any council committee reports?
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette.
the Finance Committee met this evening to receive an update from the Finance Director regarding city finances through the end of September 30th, 2021. There were no issues raised. And just a reminder that there will be a joint meeting of the Finance Committee with the BPU on 8 November at 5 p.m. And there'll be another Finance Committee meeting on the 30th of November at 5 p.m. to receive the 2020 budget.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Mr. Harold.
there is a Transportation and Safety Committee meeting scheduled for November 1st. I forget, was that 6:15 or 6:15 on November 1st to go over the proposed road improvements. And also, it's not really strictly a committee report, but the Sidewalk Commission is scheduled to have a meeting on October 27th at 5:30.
Okay. Are there any other council committee reports this evening? Okay. Before we get into the reading of legislation, I know that on at least one occasion this evening, we're going to have an ordinance where there's going to be an unusually large amount of discussion. So the way I'm thinking about this is to kind of keep things moving. If someone is going to propose an amendment, I would like to kind of put some time constraints in that if someone makes an amendment, that they would take about 4 minutes to describe their amendment and why they feel it's necessary. And then after they've had a chance to introduce their amendment, other council members would have about 2 minutes each to comment on the amendment. And if more discussion is required, we'll keep going around. But I would like to kind of set some standards just so that everybody gets a chance to participate, and we're not here necessarily till 11 or 12 o'clock. So if there's no objection to those guidelines, that's kind of how I'd like to proceed with that.
Mr. President,
Mr. Harold.
I want to commend you on saying all of that without once looking at me.
Well, you're the most brief person I know, so it wouldn't affect you anyway. Okay, that being said, Kay, could you lead us in the reading of legislation?
Yes. Legislation for first reading. Resolution number 3805 for first reading. Resolution transferring previously appropriated funds.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette.
I move to suspend the rules and give Resolution 3805 its second and third readings.
Second.
Okay, properly moved and seconded. Kay.
Harold?
Yes.
Harold?
Yes.
Hollenbaugh?
Yes.
Phipps?
Yes.
Robinette?
Yes.
Roland?
Yes.
Zanfordino?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Okay, so the rules are suspended for Resolution 3805.
Resolution number 3805 for second and third reading, resolution transferring previously appropriated funds.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette.
I move to adopt Resolution 3805.
Second.
All right, properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All right, okay.
Hollenbaugh?
Yes.
Phipps?
Yes.
Robinette?
Yes.
Roland?
Yes.
Zanfordino?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Harold?
Yes.
Okay, Resolution 3805 is adopted.
Resolution number 3806 for first reading, resolution authorizing the sale of obsolete or unfit municipally owned personal property which is not needed for public use by internet auction and authorizing the municipal administrator to enter into a contract with GovDeals Incorporated for ongoing internet auctions for calendar year 2022. Resolution number 3807 for first reading. Resolution authorizing the municipal administrator to enter into a renewal of the agreement with the Wood County Public Defender. Ordinance number 8970 for first reading. Ordinance providing supplemental appropriations for the current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio during the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2021 and ending December 31, 2021.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette.
I move to suspend the rules and give Ordinance 8970 its second, and third readings.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Kay?
Phipps?
Yes.
Robinette?
Yes.
Roland?
Yes.
Zanfordino?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Harold?
Yes.
Hollenbaugh?
Yes. All right, the rules are suspended for Ordinance 8970.
Ordinance number 8970 for second and third reading. Ordinance providing supplemental appropriations for the current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio during the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2021 and ending December 31, 2021.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette.
I move to adopt Ordinance 8970.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay.
Robinette?
Yes.
Roland?
Yes.
Zanfordino?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Harold?
Yes.
Hollenbaugh?
Yes.
Phipps?
Yes.
All right, Ordinance 8970 is adopted.
Ordinance number 8971 for first reading, ordinance amending and adopting section 33.04 of the codified ordinances of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio relative to pay scales for seasonal employees. Ordinance number 8972 for first reading, ordinance authorizing the Public Services Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract or contracts for various roadway improvements. Ordinance number 8973 for first reading, ordinance authorizing the Utilities Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract or contracts for supplying annual inventory requirements, underground and overhead lines insurance, sale of scrap materials, and participation in the AMP Joint Purchasing Program in 2022. Ordinance number 8974 for first reading, ordinance amending the zoning district map of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio for approximately 4.21 acres of land located at 300 East Poe Road from M2 General Industrial to B2 General Commercial zoning as petitioned for by Robert and Patricia Mauer.
Mr. President,
Ms. Phipps.
we need to set a public hearing for ordinance 8974, I believe Monday, December 6th at 6:45 available. Is that correct? Okay, awesome. Thank you.
December 6th at,
6:45.
okay, thank you. All right. Please continue.
Legislation for second reading. Ordinance number 8969 for second reading. Ordinance authorizing the mayor of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio to enter into a housing revolving loan fund administration agreement. Legislation for third reading. Ordinance number 8962 for third reading. Ordinance amending and adopting section 35.70 of the codified ordinances of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio regarding city fees and fees charged for services.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette,
I move to adopt ordinance 8962.
Second.
properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All right, Kay?
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette.
Yes.
Okay, so ordinance 8962 is adopted.
Ordinance number 8966 for third reading. Ordinance accepting deed for Dunbridge Road right-of-way from Trilogy Healthcare and dedicating the property for right-of-way purposes and declaring an emergency.
Mr. President,
Ms. Phipps?
I move to adopt the emergency clause for ordinance 8966.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Kay?
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland.
Yes.
Okay, so the emergency clause is adopted for ordinance 8966.
Mr. President,
Ms. Phipps?
I move to adopt ordinance 8966.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay?
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino.
Yes.
All right, ordinance 8966 is adopted.
Ordinance number 8967 for third reading, ordinance amending Chapter 121 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio regarding rental dwelling registration and inspection by abolishing current Section 121.08 and adopting Sections 121.01 through 121.09.
Mr. President,
Mr. Zanfordino?
I move that we adopt ordinance 8967.
Second?
Second.
Okay, properly moved and seconded. Discussion?
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, Mark. Yeah, I thought I would do that and then you would say discussion. So sorry if I went out of order.
No, you were fine.
Oh,
I was
excellent.
just
Thank you.
waiting on a second.
Okay, great. Let me say a few things just to start, I guess, and I'll try to do 2 minutes. Yeah, I chaired the committee that resulted in this legislation. And, to hear the reaction to it, you would think it was fairly draconian, and it really is not. Basically, what we have before us is a codification of what I think would be best practices. And to be honest, to be completely honest, what we have before us is disappointingly weak, in my opinion. I led the committee that oversaw this with Bill Harold, Neocles while he was with us, and Jeff Dennis is now on the committee. We were basically given this topic to explore, but told in the beginning that there would be no new staff, not to expose the city to legal jeopardy, and basically got out of the gates with a pretty dead in the water concept. So, we proceeded the best we could. And I guess I just want to say that what we have before us tonight is really not the work of the committee. The committee influenced what we have before us to a certain extent, but we basically have a proposal from the administration. And I think it'll have a minor good impact on Bowling Green. But again, to be completely honest, it's light years short of what I hoped for and what most college towns in Bowling Green do. So, I'm clearly very comfortable with saying this needs to be addressed. And, we'll see what my peers have to add. But, I would like to say that this is not a drummed up issue by the Eastside Neighborhood Association. This is an issue that consultants come to Bowling Green and recommend we do something about. This is an issue that one consultant said that we are on a slippery slope and it's going to become a very steep slope in the near future. So to me, this is not us versus them, good guys, bad guys. This is trying to do what college towns do, and we are being met with terrific resistance. So not even quite sure at this moment how I will ultimately vote on what's before us based on what I said. I'll see, Bob McComber used to come to council meetings and say he wasn't sure what he was about to do. And I'm in that position really for the first time in my 16 years on council. I do want to say again, though, consultants see a concern here. And I guess I certainly want to say that this is probably, in my 16 years, an issue that I've received more email about than maybe one other issue. And 85 to 95% of the people I've received emails from are expressing concern. 3 people have contacted me and asked me not to vote for the rather tepid thing that is before us. So again, excuse my jumping out of the gates with great candor, but I think we have something before us that is a start at best, and something that is way less intrusive than every other college town I know of in Ohio. And I think I'll stop there for now, Mark.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Ms. Rowland.
Yes. Since I've heard some of the speakers speak tonight, I think it behooves one of us to state what this ordinance that we have before us does. So I'm going to read off a little list of what it does do. It mandates every rental in the city of Bowling Green to be registered by March 1st, 2020, or face a $250 fine per week for not being registered. Requires every rental property to have an exterior and interior safety inspection using the form provided by the city of Bowling Green. The inspection form must be signed by the property owner, attesting to the fact that it is true and accurate. The violation for falsifying a form is $100 on first offense, $200 on the second, and $500 on the third. A copy of this form must be presented to the tenant. The tenant must sign the form as proof that they have been given a copy. The form must be placed in a conspicuous place within the rental dwelling where it can be seen by all tenants. If a landlord needs to make repairs that cannot be done immediately, a plan for repairs must be submitted to the city. Auditing the inspection forms is not written into our ordinance at this point, and this is very intentional. Since we must have a search warrant to go inside anyone's personal property, we will be able to get reports from tenants as to whether or not their particular inspection report is accurate. If the city learns it's not accurate, a search warrant can be obtained using the tenant as the witness. At that time, the city does an inspection, and if violations were found, then the landlord must pay a licensed inspection company to do follow-up inspections. Self-certification cannot be done at that time by the landlord. This is truly the best I think we can do at this time. I know in time we will make changes and there will be changes needed. No one is saying this is final. Finally, one of the reasons it's not feasible to mandate an inspection be done by a licensed home inspector at this time is that we currently estimate we have some 7,200 rental units within the city of Bowling Green alone. Home inspectors must now be licensed by the state of Ohio. There are only 7 licensed home inspectors in Wood County. If we are to do this in the name of keeping our tenants safe, we should get it done now and not wait for years in order to have licensed inspectors inspect every unit. I am for getting this done now, and I will support this ordinance as it is now.
Okay, well, apparently we're going to make some statements before we get to the amendment process. So if there's anyone else that would like to make a statement before we get to a discussion of amendments, I probably will like to make some comments at some point, but I'll just sort of reserve my comments for the end.
Mr. President,
Mr. Harold.
I'm assuming since I submitted to the rest of council 8 particular items that I get 4 minutes per item.
You would assume incorrectly.
I will skip around and I'm assuming everybody had a chance to read it. A couple things that are, since we kind of opened it up to non-amendment statements, I'll go to the second, and this is addressed to the administration. In light of the challenges faced by the administration in entering the registrations into our database, despite the how do you pronounce that?
Herculean, Bill.
Thank you. Herculean, I wrote it. Efforts of Heather and the planning department, I would like to give the administration a chance to weigh in on the need to move out the registration deadline and possibly a need to move out the inspection deadline. I don't have a suggestion. I just want to give the administration a chance to weigh in whether you think that it should be extended. I mean, there's a deadline for people to turn in the registrations, and of course we're working on those. Do you have any thoughts as to any adjustment?
Thank you for the question. We did discuss this briefly this afternoon after seeing your question. We don't really at this point see any value or any need to extend the registration deadline. An ongoing process. I think that I was told this afternoon that we have received at this point roughly 500. Engineering department, planning, everybody involved in that is building the database, and as we've explained before, it's difficult. It takes quite a bit of time. There's a great deal of verification involved in that. But having said all of that, we're doing the work. But in terms of extending the deadline, we don't think that's necessary at this point. But yet, as I stand here today, I'm not certain that I can tell you exactly when we would expect that if we do receive, in fact, by the deadline, a registration for all of the known rental properties. I can't necessarily tell you when the database will be complete. There's a large volume, and as I mentioned, it's time intensive. We're working on it, so we'll learn more as we gather more registrations and continue the process.
I encourage you to keep in communication.
Happy to do that.
Thank you.
The mayor's comments, that's included in your time.
Well, I'm glad you didn't know that before. The next item is, as always, it is important to appropriately determine our legislative responsibilities and the executive responsibilities. Therefore, it's important for council to specify the form to use, and it is important for council to determine the fees, if any. As in many cases, the administration's recommendations can be used as part of our decision-making process. But these are important pieces of the legislation. It's our responsibility to fashion and pass the legislation. So it is proper for us to discuss the self-inspection form to use. Example is the one that the Community Improvement Committee came up with. I'm assuming and hoping that that is the template for whatever form is made up. Community Improvement Committee worked on that, passed it. So that's a long way of saying, I hope that when it comes time for the form, the self-inspection form, that what we work from is what the committee recommended. My next point, because of the importance of this legislation and the understanding that it is multi-phased approach, as Sandy said, I strongly suggest that we discuss having a regular update mechanism in place. A good example of this oversight is the approach that Greg has taken in monitoring our recycling effort, as well as our financing. The Finance Committee meets on a quarterly basis, as we did tonight, and I would like us to agree and commit to having whatever council committee Mark specifies, be it transportation and safety, community improvement, or possibly an ad hoc council committee, to do regular monitoring of implementation. despite our best efforts, I think we can be confident that adjustments will need to be made. And that's not really anything that we need to vote on, and just to keep top of mind that it would be nice going into the future to have that. And thankfully, I only have one other item before I get into specific amendments. And that is, last meeting, I handed out a table, a 2x2 table, well, rows and columns, I should say. And I would like to have, and I'd like this to be reset from these other points, because it's an entirely new point, is a council discussion on whether or not we should specify a number of audits, and whether or not we would specify an audit procedure. If it turns out that there is no support for having council immediately come up with a procedure, then fine, then it's a very short topic. Likewise with the number of audits. It has been mentioned on a number of occasions by John and myself, at least, that a very important part of the Community Improvement Committee's recommendations was to have an audit procedure in place. And there's a few options on how to do that. But although there is the capability in the ordinance, it's really not stressed. And so I guess my question for the rest of council is, do we wish to have a set number specified? And if the answer to that is yes, then we have a question, we have another decision whether we want to put it in the ordinance or as a council policy or just simply a request.
Are you going to make a motion that a set number be made?
If it will move things along, I'll do that, but I was kind of hoping to get some idea from the rest of council.
Well, the best way to get some idea is to make a proposed amendment and see how it goes.
Okay. I propose that we change section 121.04 B3. So 121.04 B3. Sounds like I'm playing bingo.
Or battleship.
Or battleship, sorry. At the end of it, first of all, B3 is a provision for city verification of compliance. I'll read what's there to give context for the additional sentence. Provision for city verification of compliance. The city shall have the authority and discretion to verify compliance by conducting on-site inspections and/or through any other relevant means as arranged with the owner, manager, or designated agent, or pursuant to the search warrant issued by judicial authority. The fee for such reinspection shall be incurred by the city. And then the amendment is that there will be a minimum of, and I put XX here because I figured we'd get some feedback from the rest of the council, but if you're informing me I should start off with a number myself, I'll put 50. There will be a minimum of 50 inspections performed each year starting in 2024. And so that period,
Starting in what year?
2024. And if there is interest in council dictating a procedure, but perhaps not now, then we could add at the end, although it's not in this, in a manner prescribed by council. So.
All right. So then your amendment is that language be added to.
Yeah, let me read it again.
121.04
B3.
B3.
121.04 B3.
Setting a number.
Yeah, there will be a minimum of 50 inspections performed each year starting in 2024 in a manner prescribed by council. I'll just throw that in there. In a manner prescribed by council. And again, I'm stating this, not that I'm wedded to it.
Right.
I have movement on the procedure as well as the number.
Right.
But so if anyone in the discussion wants to change the number, I'm game. But
Okay.
that's my motion.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Well, just to discuss it a little bit before that might happen.
Point of order,
We
Mr. President.
need to have a
Nothing can be
second.
discussed
Yeah, we need a
without a second.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Discussion.
So Bill, you say 50 audits. Is that the number I'm hearing?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
again, it's,
He was spitballing.
I mean, it's not totally random because it could have been a negative number at that point, in which case we're really in trouble. So there's some thought given to it. What I'm trying to do is get a foot in the door to have there be audits, whether it's 25 or whether it's 50. To me, that's not the important part because we can revisit that. But there's some that say, well, we don't want to have audits until we learn more. Well, one way to learn more is to have audits and learn from the audits and gather data from the audits. So that's the motivation, is to get something in place so that we do have audits performed. And then as we learn from that, we'll adjust. So if you want to change that number, or anybody wants to change it, I'm fine with that.
Well, the motion's already been made.
Yeah, we can amend the amendment, or I could withdraw and resubmit. There's a couple different options. Again, I wanted to have the discussion, then make
Right.
the amendment, but we can do it this way.
All right. Anyone else have a comment?
Yeah, Mr. President. Bill, you had some information about a statistically significant number of rentals. Do you remember what that figure was?
The figure that I gave was about 250. The rationale for it was based off of a few assumptions. One assumption was that we were interested in coming up with a confidence interval for the actual percentage of self-certifications that were accurate. And so when you work through the formulas, you can get around 250 if you assume the worst case scenario, which is 50%. So if we go with what's probably more the case, where we may have maybe 2%, then that number of 250 goes down dramatically. And so the 250 was just a ballpark. Another assumption is that is the goal there is to come up with some idea as to how accurate, the percent that are accurate of the submitted, of the entire population without inspecting all of the population. That may be a secondary goal. And inherent in that is a random component. In other words, if we go and we take 250 or 125 or whatever, it's assumed in the whole scheme of the formula and how you interpret it that it's random. So what we may want to do initially is avoid that and be more targeted towards those that have more of a reason for us to be concerned about the safety. So it's kind of like two goals there. One is improve safety, and the other is get a handle on the percent that are of the forms that are accurately filled out. And I've given that thought, and the statistician in me is like, no, give me more is better. But the public policy analyst in me is like, no, really, that's too big of a price to answer that one statistical question. So the number was 250. But again, to get this ball rolling, and to be sensitive to the number of properties that would be primary ones to inspect, that's why I lowered it to about 50. And again, it could be lower because the goals are different.
So Bill, when you first made your argument about 250, not all of us are working with statistics every day, as you are. But I thought you were saying that 250 is enough of an end to give you a true snapshot. If those were done randomly and even speedily, to be honest. But that, I think, was your original argument, was that the 250 would basically give you a glimpse of 7,000 items.
Yeah.
Does 50 do the same thing?
What it does is, and I think you all may be shocked that I actually got paid money to teach this stuff, but if it's 50, then it just widens the confidence interval. So when you say we're 95% confidence between 2 and 4%, you might be able to say now a 95% confidence between 1 and 7%. So it widens the confidence interval. Again, if it's random, But for now, I've put that kind of aside, the statistical part, and I've determined that the overriding reason is to increase safety and having some audit component to begin with, where we get experience in the auditing, overrides my desire as a statistician to come up with a narrow confidence interval.
Okay. Any more conversation on the amendment?
I'll go again. Mr. President, we've heard from the city attorney that establishing a number of random targeted audit inspections is unconstitutional. I guess we should probably address that before we vote on it.
Address it in what fashion?
I mean, that's the understanding, is that this would be unconstitutional to pass this, correct?
Yes, that's my opinion. I don't know of any exception to the Fourth Amendment that says that random searches without probable cause are okay if it makes our sample significantly more accurate. I think you jeopardize the whole thing by doing something like this. And the peculiar thing to me, because I see the complaints that come in around here, is if we act on all the complaints we get, we're going to do way more than this anyway. So I don't understand the discussion. I'll be honest with you. I don't understand at this point this desire to stick a raw number in there and create a defense for everybody that we want to go inspect. That's
So,
where I am.
with that in mind, if the thinking is that we have more than 50 that we would audit in a year anyway, then there is no downside, that we would be doing at least 50. Now, if you're saying that it's more like
The
25.
fact that it's in the code will create a defense for the very first person we go to. We'll say, you're only here because council amended this thing and said you got to do 50 of these. That's what will happen. And we'll be up in federal court with the same guy that ruled on our occupancy. That's what will happen. This is unnecessary and unwise.
But other than that,
Other than that, I have no opinion.
Mr.
I
President,
mean, we've talked about this for months, so I'm going to be as strong as I can. You're going to vote on this.
Right.
This is a bad idea.
All right.
Mr. President,
Yeah, go ahead.
I concur with the city attorney. I think this is an unnecessary measure that would open us to risk. And because of that, I move to call the question.
All right. Kay?
Mr.
Harold?
And
So just a point of clarification, because there was an important point that was made, you want to choke off further discussion and the possibility of withdrawing the amendment. Is that what you're saying, Greg?
I made a motion to vote now. It hasn't been seconded yet, but that's what I
Okay.
did.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Kay?
Harold?
Well, how about that?
The rotation.
I will vote no, knowing that we can revisit this.
Hollenbaugh?
No.
Phipps?
No.
Robinette?
No?
Roland?
No.
Zanfordino?
No.
Dennis?
No.
Okay. That amendment has failed. Let's see. As far as the comments go, I think we got Rachel, if you'd like to make a comment, Jeff, if you'd like to make a comment, or Greg, if you would like to make a comment.
Mr. President,
Ms. Phipps?
I actually have an amendment
Okay.
to 121.04. I'd like to add language to create a paragraph C. That's
Paragraph what?
Paragraph C. I have this for you, Kay.
Okay.
And I also have copies if anyone else would like one. Short and sweet. Stating that the city administrator or of course, the city administrator or a designee may set and periodically revise a schedule of fees to be approved by city council for the registration and self-inspection program created by this chapter. So that's the language. May I explain my reasoning?
After it's seconded.
Sure.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded.
Mr. President?
I think I have to in here.
Okay, my reasoning here, because Lori and Mayor Osbacher have told us that the administration and staff are still studying how to roll out and enforce a rental self-inspection program, I'd like council to make clear in the ordinance that as that effort continues in the next few months, the city may consider setting fees if necessary to administer the new program. I, for one, continue to have real questions about the true cost of enforcement efforts to the city. I think we all understood that the administration could certainly come back to council with a fee schedule at some point for our approval if they deemed it necessary. Lori's memo that accompanied the ordinance when it was introduced last month says as much. My amendment just makes that understanding express. I've discussed this with Mayor Osbacher, and I believe he has no objection. Again, this simply makes clear that here, as elsewhere in our code, the city administrator may set fees for the program, fees that will then need to be approved by council. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette.
on this matter, the language proposed really does nothing more than restate what our current law is and what our charter provides. This process is the process we use day in and day out. And so really all this adds to this legislation are words. It adds nothing new, no new procedure, no new way of doing business, no value of any kind, only words. And for that reason, I won't support the amendment.
Any other comments on the proposed amendment to add 121.04C? Okay.
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
No?
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold.
No.
Okay, so the amendment for a 121.04C has passed. Are there other recommendations for amendments to the ordinance?
Mr. President, section 121.05C, it says, self-certification inspection shall be accomplished in the manner set forth below, and then point 2, immediately make any repairs to the rental housing unit that are necessary to achieve compliance with the requirements set forth in the self-certification forms. We had a very knowledgeable lobby visitor a few meetings back mentioned that immediately is quite constraining, especially A, because immediately is like, and then B, we have some supply issues, and despite the desire to fix something, it may not happen immediately. So with that in mind, I suggest that we change the word immediately to within, again, I have XX days, or in extenuating circumstances, a time period agreed upon by the city. So I don't know what, but.
I mean, is this in the form of making an amendment to change this, or?
Yeah, I'm open to changing XX to be something, 2 weeks, a month, whatever seems to make sense.
Okay. And the rationale behind this being that, in an
Immediately.
environment where we have supply chain disruptions, it may not be possible to address this immediately.
Well, and honestly, unless there's a legal interpretation of the word immediately that isn't common usage, you can't fix something immediately. Uh-oh, Mike's coming up again.
What you might do is look at 05A1, which provides for 30 days. And maybe what you could do is add a
Okay.
phrase to that that says, unless extended by the planning director. So they have 30 days.
Okay,
So to me, that's what immediate means elsewhere, because we've said they have 30 days. But if 30 days isn't enough, maybe just have them request an extension of the planning director.
okay,
See what I mean?
yeah. Then,
You live with that?
yeah, I think in light of what Mike said, if we add to section 121.05A1, abated within 30 days or time period agreed upon by the planning,
Unless extended by the planning director.
unless extended by the planning director. And
See where
then,
we are, Kay?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
and then also in 121.05C, have the similar wording within 30 days, unless extended by the planning director, what Mike said. That way it's consistent.
Mr. President, I'd like to point out that we already have, under D, if any rental housing unit cannot be self-certified because of necessary repairs cannot be made, the owner shall immediately notify the city, and it does say including time schedule. It is building in a time schedule
And
to the city.
doesn't, and I should have done it, it doesn't really specify, though, that you can get more time. And I think that's maybe what
Okay,
That's the
Bill's
point.
talking about.
All right.
I
So,
said notify us, but I guess I assumed that meant we would work with them, but
all right.
probably we ought to say,
okay.
probably we ought to say.
The change that Bill's recommending then makes it clear that you have
Yeah.
a 30-day
But you
time
have an
period
option to ask for more.
in the event you can't get a dishwasher because they're on a boat
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so could you kind of clarify this for us, Bill?
Please.
So we know what your amendment is.
I was hoping Kay would.
I've got A1
Okay,
that were unless extended by the planning director. And
okay.
so what are we doing to C2?
C2 is within a month or unless extended by the planning director. Within 30 days, unless extended by the planning director.
And that goes at the end of 2?
It goes in place of immediately.
Okay. So within 30 days
Why?
or unless extended,
By the planning director.
and that's, we're taking immediately out.
Correct. Thank you. And there hasn't been a second yet.
I will second. Okay. So is there any discussion on Bill's recommended amendment that seems to clear up some confusion?
Call for a vote?
Second.
All right, okay.
Okay. Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbach.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so that amendment is passed as well.
Mr. President,
Mr. Harold.
my last item, section 121.05, which is when you get to part C. Okay, so 121.05C, it's C starts off by saying self-certification inspection shall be accomplished in the manner set forth below, and then it's got 4 steps. Step 3 says complete the self-certification forms. I would like to add a step 4, move the and to the end of step 4, and renumber step 4 to step 5. But the new step 4 would be sign the self-certification form and have at least one current occupant, if any, sign the form. That will make it very clear that it is signed by, that's signed. And also that at least one tenant, if there is one, signs it, which is in keeping with what the Community Improvement Committee had recommended.
That language is already in here somewhere.
I'm trying to make it, I'm trying to make it clear because in this section C, it shall be accomplished in the manner set forth below. One of the things we try and accomplish with legislation is to not have it be onerous. And so if someone were to look at this and not see it elsewhere, that might be a little confusing. So this is actually to clarify.
I don't care what you do, but if you're going to do that, I think it should say the occupant, if any,
Yeah, I had that.
because I didn't hear you say that.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Some of these units may end up being empty, and then, in fact, I would say a goodly percentage of them are going to be empty.
Yeah, depending on when
Unless
they
it's
do it,
done.
sure. Again, I said 4, sign the self-certification form and have at least one current occupant, if any, sign the form.
Yeah, it's 121.04 B1 is where it says that, it
It has
says
to be signed.
the results of all inspections shall be clearly documented, blah, 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 inspection forms, and such inspections shall be in compliance with timelines, criteria specified in this chapter. Okay, occupant. Where am I? This chapter signed by the owner or a designee and by an occupant if the, I was taking a bath. And I was just getting to the part I was trying to find. I was reading until I found the part I was trying to find. Okay, it says, let's see.
Occupant shall attest.
Owner or designee and by an occupant if the unit is occupied at the time of inspection. Occupant shall also attest to receipt of the inspection checklist. So I mean, it's already in here, but what you're saying is you want to add it to a second place?
What I want to do is if you take a look at this, occupant shall attest only to the receipt of the inspection checklist. That's not necessarily signing the checklist. That could be a separate document. Plus, if somebody decides they're trying to figure this thing out and figure out how they're supposed to comply with it, if they read this part and they're okay. But if they read this section right here that I've been referencing, then it may escape their attention. So that's in an effort to make it clear and consistent.
So what is your amendment?
What I had said it was, which is for section 121.05C to add a new 4, which states sign the self-certification form and have at least one current occupant, comma, if any, comma, sign the form, and move the and from the old 3 and change the numbering for the old 4 to be the new 5.
Is that wording in harmony with what's written in the other section? Are we using the right terms? I know we're using the word occupant, but are all terms? Total.
Mr. President,
Ms. Phipps?
I would maybe make 2 points here.
I don't think this has been seconded yet, and
Oh,
we're
yeah.
discussing it. So could someone second his
I
motion?
wasn't even sure that he had finished explaining it.
Well, that could be. I'm sorry, Rachel.
No, oh my goodness, no,
All
thank
right.
you.
Does anyone want to provide a second? I will provide a second to move along. And I guess my question is to Mike, is what Bill has just said, is that simply restating what we've already stated in a second location? It's,
Sounds like it to me, and I
Okay.
think Bill had said it does.
okay, so,
Yeah.
okay.
Mr. President,
Ms. Phipps?
you could also just add a reference to 121.04 B1, where
just
B
refer.
relists it. And I think that would make sure that there's no conflict. And then just as a practical point, I mean, the administration is going to be creating this form and presumably adding the line for a tenant signature. So I hear you, but I also think that this will be accomplished when the administration carefully creates the form.
Okay.
The way it is currently with what you had read, it says attest It doesn't necessarily mean that they actually sign the form. And so again, I think it clarifies it.
Sentence before, Bill says signed.
Mm,
Signed by the owner or a designee and by an occupant if the unit is occupied at the time of inspection.
Then,
And so the second sentence then just.
so it makes it consistent.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, what we could do instead, if we don't want to add a fifth point, is in 3, complete the self-certification forms. We could have in parentheses, which includes, to make it clear, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to have be its own separate thing. There's one way, more than one way to accomplish this.
Okay. So it has been moved, it has been seconded. Has it been thoroughly discussed, or is there another point that someone would like to make?
So Bill, you are acknowledging it's in here that the occupant will sign it. You're just adding in a second area to make sure it's. If a
Yeah,
person's just reading a given
if you
section.
read this one long, huge paragraph, it's not as clearly laid out just simply because it's got a lot of words in it. And I understand the irony of my saying that. So if we're going to list the steps separately, then we should be consistent. And if we can, even clearer.
Okay.
And then when we're done talking about this, I think we want to talk about landscaping.
All right. Any other comments on this proposed amendment? Okay.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes?
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Phipps.
Yes.
Okay, so that one passes as well. Does anyone else have any proposed amendments to the ordinance? Hearing none. Is there anyone that has yet to make a statement before we vote on the ordinance that would like to make a statement? Okay. I do want to say just one thing, and there's an ordinance that I keep on my desk all the time, as sort of a reminder to me, kind of a cautionary tale. And this ordinance hasn't been in council chambers for a while, but I have mentioned it before. And it has a very unassuming title. You should recognize this, Bill, because your signature is on the back of it. This ordinance is from 1989. And the title is Ordinance Amending Sections 150.75, 150.76, and 150.77 of the codified ordinances of the city of Bowling Green. And what this ordinance did, and it's ordinance number 4981, the purpose of this ordinance was to end grandfathered properties in the city of Bowling Green. And this was a very controversial topic, not unlike the one that is before us this evening. And much like the ordinance before us this evening, there were property owners that were opposed to this, but there were also residents that were opposed to this. And from people I've talked to, my understanding is that the voices of the residents that were opposed to this weighed more heavily on council's decision to vote this down than anything else. And the problem was that this would end grandfathered properties in the city of Bowling Green after 30 years. And the residents that had an issue with this thought that 30 years was too long. And therefore, in hopes of something better, and even in the minutes, I went back and looked at the minutes from the meeting, there were comments made by council members at the time that perhaps something better would come along. And if this would have actually passed when it was before council in May of 1989, it would have gone into effect a couple of years ago. And this would have been a problem solved instead of a problem continued. So I always keep this on my desk just sort of as a reminder that it's important that when we have an opportunity to make progress and take a step in the right direction, that we don't let the perceived perfect be the enemy of the good. And so that's just what I want to say about Ordinance 4981.
Mr. President,
Mr. Harrell.
having lived through that, and more than likely sitting in that chair right there, I fully concur with the lesson learned. There was opposition from both sides, and I believe it was a 1-6 vote, and it was. I think
I think it was 7-0 it was voted down.
I think it might have been 1-6. Yeah, 1-6.
Okay.
And
I wasn't there.
I was.
At that age, I was a student at BGSU, and I was probably doing more entertaining things.
Be that as it may, the lesson is well learned that if we do wait as opposed to take a step in the right direction, we may regret it later. So,
Okay.
Well stated, sir.
Okay. Well, that's all I wanted to say about that. We have had a motion and a second. So, Kay, could you call the roll, please?
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
No.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
and Robinette.
No.
All right. So ordinance 8967 is adopted.
As amended,
As amended is adopted. Is there any other business to come before council this evening?
Mr. President, I move that we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right. Thank you all for coming this evening.